The Grant's journey begins. The soft murmur of the airport terminal buzzed with an energy that mirrored the anticipation of the Grant family. They moved with quiet confidence through the first-class check-in area, their steps measured, their smiles broad with the quiet satisfaction of a family that had worked hard for everything they had. Adrian Grant, a respected human rights lawyer with a gentle but firm demeanor, led the way, his expression calm and steady. His years of dedication to justice had shaped him into a man who knew his worth and the worth of those he defended. Beside him walked his wife, Naima, a renowned professor and researcher whose work on social justice and racial equality had earned her accolades and respect within academic circles. She was a woman of grace and resilience, a pillar of strength not only for her students and colleagues, but for her family as well. Her achievements were a testament to years of hard work and an unyielding commitment to truth and progress. Following close behind was their son, Aaron, a bright-eyed teenager brimming with excitement and wonder. This wasn't just a family vacation, it was a well-deserved celebration. It had been years since Adrian and Naima had been able to set aside time purely for themselves and Aaron. Their lives, marked by sacrifices and countless hours dedicated to their careers and the causes they championed, rarely allowed for moments like these. But now, they were about to embark on a journey that would allow them to reconnect, to breathe, and to celebrate each other. As they approached the first-class check-in counter, Aaron's eyes sparkled with excitement, darting around to take in the luxurious ambience of the exclusive lounge area. Men and women dressed in finely tailored clothes sipped coffee from delicate porcelain cups, reading newspapers, or tapping away on sleek tablets. The scent of freshly brewed espresso mingled with the faint aroma of leather from the polished seats, creating an atmosphere of sophistication and calm. Aaron leaned toward his father, his voice a whisper filled with awe. "Dad, is this really our line? We're flying first class." Adrian chuckled softly, placing a reassuring hand on his son's shoulder. "Yes, son, this is our line. We've worked hard for this, and now it's time to enjoy the fruits of that hard work." The young woman at the counter greeted them with a warm smile, her eyes bright with the energy of a new day. "Good morning, Mr. and Mrs. Grant," she said, her tone respectful and welcoming. "Welcome to first class. We've been expecting you. Here are your boarding passes, and please feel free to enjoy our first-class lounge before your flight." Aaron's face broke into a wide grin as he leaned closer to the counter, excitement bubbling over. "This is amazing," he exclaimed. "Is it your first time flying first class, young man?" the attendant asked, amused by his enthusiasm. Aaron nodded, his smile spreading even wider. "Yes, ma'am. I can't believe we're actually here." Adrian and Naima exchanged a glance, their hearts swelling with pride and happiness as they watched their son's reaction. For them, this moment was about more than just a luxurious experience. It was a testament to the years of perseverance, to the late nights, the sacrifices, and the unbreakable bond they had built together. With their boarding passes in hand, they moved through security and entered the first-class lounge, a serene oasis compared to the bustling main terminal. Plush armchairs were arranged in small clusters, soft lighting bathed the room in a warm glow, and servers moved gracefully between tables, offering refreshments to the guests. Aaron's gaze swept over the room, taking in every detail with the wide-eyed wonder of a teenager seeing a new world. As they settled into a corner of the lounge, Naima leaned over to Adrian, her voice filled with emotion. "Can you believe it? 10 years ago, we were scraping by, trying to make ends meet. And now, look at us." Adrian reached for her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. His eyes reflected the pride they both felt. "We've come a long way, Naima, together." While Adrian and Naima sipped on their complimentary drinks and discussed their travel itinerary, Aaron was completely absorbed in exploring his surroundings. To him, the lounge, with its serene atmosphere and attentive service, felt like a world apart from anything he had ever known. It wasn't just luxury he was experiencing. It was the realization of his parents' dedication and the result of their sacrifices. As they eventually boarded their flight, the Grants walked down the jet bridge and into the spacious first-class cabin. Aaron's eyes grew wide as he took in the plush leather seats, the private partitions, and the array of buttons and screens at each seat. "Wow!" he exclaimed, almost bouncing into his window seat. "Look at all these controls and screens. This is incredible." Naima laughed, her heart swelling at her son's infectious joy. "Just don't accidentally eject yourself from the plane," she teased, settling into her own seat. Adrian and Naima exchanged a quiet smile, both acknowledging the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. They were aware of the subtle glances from some passengers, friendly, curious, or perhaps surprised. But they brushed it off, too caught up in their own joy to let the opinions of strangers cloud the experience. Aaron, too, seemed oblivious to any looks directed their way, absorbed in discovering all the amenities his seat had to offer. However, the tranquility of the cabin was about to be interrupted by an unexpected disturbance. Just as they were settling in, a new passenger entered the first-class cabin. She was a woman in her late 40s, dressed in designer clothes and carrying a Louis Vuitton bag that matched her pristine, pointed heels. Her sharp, assessing gaze swept over the cabin, lingering a bit longer on each passenger, as though mentally categorizing each one. When her eyes fell upon the Grants, her expression hardened subtly, a narrowing of the eyes, a slight tightening of her mouth. Her gaze lingered on them with an air of disapproval, something that felt almost palpable. This was Lauren Fields, a regular in first-class travel who wore her sense of entitlement as proudly as her expensive clothing. She had the look of someone who believed she belonged in every exclusive space she occupied, and believed that others did not. With a theatrical sigh, she approached a nearby flight attendant, her voice raised just enough to draw the attention of nearby passengers. "Excuse me," she said, her tone clipped and authoritative. "I believe there's been some sort of mistake. That family." She inclined her head slightly toward the Grants. "I'm not sure they belong here. Could you check their tickets?" The young flight attendant, clearly caught off guard, glanced between Lauren and the Grants, her friendly smile faltering slightly. "Ma'am, I assure you, all passengers in first class are seated correctly. Is there an issue with your seat?" Lauren's lips thinned as she continued in a low but pointed tone. "I just think that certain standards are expected in first class. People like them. Well, it's just not what one expects." Adrian, overhearing the exchange, clenched his jaw, but maintained his composure. Years of advocating for justice had taught him the power of restraint and the importance of standing his ground with dignity. He met Lauren's gaze evenly, his expression calm yet unyielding. "Excuse me, ma'am," Adrian said, his voice polite but firm. "My family and I paid for these seats, just like everyone else here." Lauren's face reddened slightly, clearly not expecting to be addressed directly. She stammered for a moment, caught off guard. "Well, I just assumed." Naima, who had been watching with a quiet, dignified strength, spoke up, her tone steady and filled with conviction. "You assumed we didn't belong here. And why is that, exactly?" Lauren faltered, momentarily at a loss for words. Around them, a few passengers shifted uncomfortably, some glancing away, others watching with keen interest. The flight attendant quickly stepped in, her voice soothing as she attempted to diffuse the tension. "Ma'am, all passengers have been seated appropriately," she said to Lauren, her tone firm yet polite. "If there's anything you need, please let us know. Otherwise, we'd appreciate everyone settling in so we can prepare for takeoff." Lauren muttered something under her breath, her face flushed with a mix of anger and embarrassment as she returned to her seat. However, as she passed by, she made a final snide remark, loud enough for the Grants and others nearby to hear. "Unbelievable. Some people think money buys class." Aaron, noticing the tension, looked up at his parents with confusion and hurt in his eyes. "Mom, did we do something wrong?" Naima wrapped her arm around him, her voice soft but resolute. "No, sweetheart, we didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes people judge others based on appearances, but that doesn't define who we are." Adrian looked at Lauren's retreating figure, his resolve solidifying. He knew that this flight would be more than just a journey from one place to another. It was a test of their strength, a challenge to the values they held dear. And with his family by his side, he was determined to stand up against the prejudice that had tried to tarnish their moment of joy. This was only the beginning of what would be an eye-opening journey for everyone in the cabin, one that would reveal the true meaning of class, dignity, and respect. The first-class encounter. As the plane began taxiing, a thick silence hung in the first-class cabin, punctuated only by the hum of the engines. The Grants were used to handling difficult situations with grace and resilience, but something about this encounter felt different. It was raw, personal. Adrian could sense the lingering stares, the judgmental whispers from other passengers who had caught the confrontation, and the heavy weight of Lauren's disdainful glare from a few seats away. Aaron shifted in his seat, visibly disturbed. His young face, usually bright with curiosity, was clouded with confusion. He looked up at his father, searching for reassurance. "Dad," he whispered, leaning close, "why did that lady say we didn't belong here? We have tickets, don't we?" Adrian placed a comforting hand on his son's shoulder, his voice steady and calm. "Yes, son, we have our tickets, just like everyone else here. Sometimes, people have a hard time understanding that everyone deserves respect, regardless of what they look like or where they come from." Naima leaned in, her voice soft but firm. "Aaron, remember what we've always taught you. Judgment says more about the person making it than it does about the one being judged. You belong wherever you choose to be, no matter what anyone else thinks." Aaron nodded slowly, still digesting his parents' words. Though young, he had a thoughtful mind, and he could feel the underlying pain in his mother's voice. He was beginning to grasp that what they'd experienced wasn't just a misunderstanding, but something deeper, something that had to do with the way others sometimes saw them. The flight attendant came by to offer pre-flight drinks, her smile faltering slightly as she glanced between the Grants and Lauren, still visibly uncomfortable from the earlier exchange. She leaned in toward Adrian, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mr. Grant, if there's anything I can do to make you more comfortable, please let me know. I'm so sorry for the misunderstanding." Adrian's face softened as he nodded politely. "Thank you. We're fine. Just here to enjoy our flight." But his calm tone belied a simmering resolve beneath the surface. He could tell that the flight attendant, young and caught between her duty and the awkward situation, wanted to offer support, but he also knew that systemic prejudice was often deeply ingrained, even in subtle ways. As the plane leveled out in the sky, the passengers began to relax, with some taking out their laptops, others flipping through magazines, and a few adjusting their seats. But even as the journey settled into a routine, Adrian noticed Lauren stealing glances at his family, her gaze cold and unyielding. It was as though she were silently daring them to justify their presence in her carefully curated world. It was Naima who finally broke the silence between them, her tone measured yet undeniably piercing. "Adrian," she said quietly but audibly enough for Lauren to hear, "it's amazing how much some people think they can control. They see people like us and think we're out of place, but what they don't understand is that our place is wherever we decide it to be." Lauren bristled, clearly aware that Naima's words were directed at her, and looked away with a stiff expression, pretending to be absorbed in her magazine. But Naima's words carried a weight that lingered, one that Adrian could see was reaching other passengers as well. Some looked down, perhaps a bit uncomfortable with the confrontation of their own unspoken biases, while others cast glances of quiet support. Aaron, emboldened by his parents' confidence, whispered, "Mom, I think people heard you." Naima smiled gently at her son, her eyes filled with pride. "Sometimes, Aaron, the people who need to hear the most are the ones who don't want to listen. It's okay to speak up, even if it makes others uncomfortable. Adrian leaned back in his seat, letting out a slow breath as he took Naima's hand. They had worked hard to build this life, to earn this moment of luxury and peace, and he wasn't about to let anyone, no matter how entitled, rob them of that. But he knew that this was more than a personal slight. It was a reflection of the world they had both worked so hard to change, a world that still clung stubbornly to outdated beliefs and prejudices. Not long after, the flight attendant reappeared, distributing menus for the first-class meal service. Adrian noticed that when she reached Lauren's seat, Lauren leaned in, speaking in a low but unmistakably audible tone. "I hope the service here doesn't cater to everyone the same way. Some standards should be preserved." The flight attendant's smile wavered, but she maintained her professionalism, acknowledging Lauren's comment with a quick nod before moving on. Adrian's jaw clenched, but he held his composure, determined not to let his anger show, especially in front of Aaron. Naima, too, had noticed Lauren's muttered remark, and she gave Adrian a subtle nod, as if to say, "We'll handle this with dignity." The food was soon served, an array of delicacies arranged meticulously on fine china. Aaron's eyes lit up as he examined his plate, his discomfort temporarily forgotten as he marveled at the elegant presentation. Adrian and Naima exchanged a quick glance, relieved that their son's excitement hadn't been completely tainted by the earlier hostility. Yet, as they began their meal, Lauren, sitting just a few seats away, couldn't seem to contain herself any longer. She made a point of sighing loudly, glancing over at the Grants with a look of barely concealed disdain. At one point, she leaned over to a fellow passenger, an elderly woman who appeared slightly bewildered by the tension, and whispered, "It's shocking what passes for class these days. It used to mean something." The elderly woman, clearly uncomfortable, gave a polite smile, but quickly turned her attention back to her meal, clearly not wanting to engage in Lauren's toxic commentary. Adrian finally decided that enough was enough. Setting down his utensils, he turned to face Lauren, his expression calm but his eyes steely. "Ma'am, I understand that our presence here may make you uncomfortable, but let me assure you, we are as entitled to these seats as you are. We've worked hard, just as you have, and we're here to enjoy this experience with our family. I would appreciate it if you could respect that." Lauren's face flushed with indignation, and she sputtered slightly before finding her voice. You think just anyone belongs in first class. Class is about more than just a ticket." Adrian's calm demeanor didn't waver. "You're absolutely right. Class is about respect, kindness, and understanding. It's not about a price tag, and it's certainly not about the color of someone's skin or the background they come from." Naima, with her usual grace, added, "Class, true class, is about how we treat others, especially those we may not understand. It's about showing dignity, even when it's difficult. We're all just people trying to make our way, and that deserves respect." The confrontation had drawn the attention of the entire first-class cabin. Passengers watched, some nodding subtly in agreement with the Grants, others shifting uncomfortably, as if grappling with their own thoughts and prejudices. The flight attendant, who had been quietly observing the exchange, stepped forward, clearly prepared to offer her support if needed. Lauren, realizing that she was outnumbered, huffed and turned back to her magazine, though her face was still flushed. Adrian could sense that the encounter had shaken her. She hadn't expected to be challenged, especially in such a poised and dignified manner. As the meal service continued, a few passengers offered the Grants quiet nods of approval, as if to say, "We're with you." Adrian and Naima felt a renewed sense of purpose in their hearts. They had come on this journey to relax and reconnect as a family. But it was becoming clear that this trip would be about more than just a family vacation. It was an opportunity to stand up, not only for themselves, but for every person who had ever been made to feel like they didn't belong. Aaron, watching his parents handle the situation with such calm strength, felt a surge of pride. He leaned over to his mother, his voice soft, but filled with admiration. "Mom, Dad, you didn't let her make you feel small." Naima smiled, wrapping her arm around him. No one can make us feel small, Aaron. We know who we are, and that's all that matters. Adrian placed a hand on his son's shoulder, his voice filled with warmth. Remember this, son. People will always have opinions, and sometimes those opinions will be unkind. But as long as you stay true to yourself, as long as you know your own worth, no one can take that from you. For the rest of the flight, the Grants settled into a peaceful rhythm, reclaiming their joy and excitement. The hostile stares and whispered judgments faded into the background as they focused on each other, savoring the experience they had worked so hard for. They had faced prejudice with dignity, had stood up for themselves with grace, and in doing so, they had taught Aaron an invaluable lesson about resilience and self-worth. As the flight continued, Adrian and Naima knew that their journey was more than just a vacation. It was a testament to their perseverance, a statement of their right to exist and thrive in any space they chose. And though the skies above were vast and filled with uncertainty, they knew one thing for sure. Together, as a family, they would soar. The unbreakable bond. The plane continued to soar through the sky, leaving behind the city lights and the tensions that had marked the beginning of the journey. The Grants, now more settled, focused on each other, determined to make this trip about joy, family, and resilience. The earlier incident with Lauren had left its mark, but they refused to let it cast a shadow over their experience. As the lights in the cabin dimmed and passengers adjusted their seats for rest, Naima took out her tablet, ready to show Aaron some of the plans she had mapped out for their trip. She leaned close to him, pulling up pictures of the sites they would visit, from ancient historical landmarks to vibrant street markets. Aaron's eyes widened with excitement as he took in the images. "Mom, I didn't know there was so much to see. Can we visit that big fountain? And what about that old fortress?" Naima smiled, wrapping an arm around him. "We'll see everything, Aaron. This is a chance for us to explore, to learn, and to enjoy each other's company. And who knows? You might even learn a thing or two about history." Aaron grinned, nudging his father. "Dad, you'll have to keep up. I'm going to see everything." Adrian laughed, his deep, reassuring voice filling the quiet cabin. "I'll do my best, but you're already faster than me. You're the one who's going to have to slow down a bit for your old man." The three of them shared a laugh, and in that moment, it was as if the entire cabin melted away, leaving only their little world, safe and warm. They were reminded of why they had come on this trip in the first place, not to sit in first class or indulge in luxury, but to spend time together, to be a family, and to celebrate everything they had worked so hard to build. As the cabin settled into the stillness of the night flight, Adrian leaned back in his seat, reflecting on everything they had overcome. He thought about the long years he and Naima had spent working tirelessly to make a difference. They had faced countless challenges and had endured more than their share of judgment and prejudice. And yet, they had persevered. Beside him, Naima seemed lost in her own thoughts, her face serene but contemplative. Adrian reached over, gently squeezing her hand. She looked at him, her eyes softening, and they shared a silent understanding. This was their journey, their story, and they were stronger for every battle they had fought together. Suddenly, Aaron, who had been watching his parents with admiration, spoke up, his voice soft but full of curiosity. "Mom, Dad, did you guys ever have to deal with people like that lady before? People who thought you didn't belong?" Naima's gaze softened as she looked at her son, her heart aching a little at his question. She wished he didn't have to confront such realities at his age, but she also knew that hiding the truth would do him no favors. She wanted him to understand their journey, to know that their strength came from years of resilience. "Aaron," she began, choosing her words carefully, "your father and I have faced challenges like that more times than we can count. There have been people who didn't believe in us, who judged us, who thought we didn't deserve to be where we are. But we didn't let that stop us." Adrian nodded, his voice calm yet firm. "Son, sometimes the world can be unfair. People may judge you based on how you look, where you come from, or even the success you've earned. But that doesn't mean you have to believe them. What matters is that you know who you are, and that you stay true to yourself, no matter what others think. Aaron listened, his young face thoughtful as he absorbed his parents' words. But isn't it hard? Doesn't it make you angry? Naima shared a quick glance with Adrian before responding. Yes, sometimes it's hard. And yes, sometimes it makes us angry. But that anger, we use it to fuel our work, to make things better for others. We turn it into something positive. That's what keeps us going. Aaron looked down, processing this. He seemed to understand, on some level, that his parents' strength came from more than just perseverance. It came from their ability to transform pain into purpose, to turn every setback into motivation. It was a lesson he would carry with him, even if he didn't fully grasp its weight yet. Their conversation was interrupted by the quiet sound of a voice behind them. "Excuse me." I couldn't help but overhear. Turning, the Grants saw an elderly man sitting a few rows back, his eyes kind and filled with a mixture of empathy and admiration. His silver hair and gentle demeanor made him seem wise, a quiet observer of the world around him. "I just wanted to say that I've been watching how you handled that unpleasantness earlier," he continued, his voice respectful. "And I have to say, I'm truly impressed. It's rare to see such grace under pressure. You're setting a powerful example for your son." Adrian nodded, acknowledging the man's words with a quiet smile. "Thank you. We try to teach our son that we're all deserving of respect, no matter where we come from." The elderly man nodded thoughtfully. "I've traveled a lot in my life, seen many things, and met many people. Prejudice is a stubborn thing, but it's people like you who help change minds, who show others what real class and dignity look like." He paused, then added, "If I may say, that young man is very lucky to have you as parents." Naima's heart swelled with gratitude, and she placed a gentle hand on Aaron's shoulder. "Thank you. That means a lot to us." As the elderly man turned back to his seat, Aaron looked up at his parents, his face beaming with pride. He seemed to understand, in that moment, that his family was part of something bigger than just a trip or a vacation. They were part of a journey that extended beyond them, a journey of resilience, dignity, and the quiet strength that came from standing up for what was right. As they settled back into their seats, Adrian noticed Lauren's gaze flickering over to them again. But this time, it was different. There was a hint of unease in her expression, a glimmer of something that almost resembled shame. She had witnessed the interaction, had seen the support the Grants had received from other passengers, and perhaps in her own way, she was beginning to question her actions. But Adrian didn't dwell on her reaction. He had more important things to focus on: his family, their joy, and the memories they were about to create together. He knew that Lauren's opinion of them was irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. What mattered was that they remained true to themselves, that they didn't let anyone else's judgment define their experience. As the night wore on, Naima and Aaron drifted off to sleep, their heads resting against each other. Adrian watched them, his heart full. This was what he had worked so hard for: this peace, this love, this family. He knew there would always be challenges, always be people who would try to make them feel less than they were. But as long as he had his family by his side, he knew they could face anything. In the dim light of the cabin, Adrian closed his eyes, allowing himself to rest. He knew that tomorrow they would land in a new place, ready to embark on new adventures together. And though the journey had started with tension, it was ending in hope, a hope that they could continue to make a difference, to break down barriers, and to inspire others through the strength of their unity. Little did they know, however, that the events on this flight would continue to ripple outward, touching lives in ways they couldn't yet imagine. The other passengers, many of whom had watched the encounter unfold, carried with them a newfound respect for the Grants, a quiet admiration that would stay with them long after the plane touched down. They had seen dignity in action, had witnessed a family's quiet defiance against prejudice and had been reminded of the power of respect, kindness, and resilience. The Grants may not have changed the world in one flight, but they had planted seeds of change in the hearts of everyone who had been watching. And as Adrian drifted into a peaceful sleep, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that he was leaving behind something far more valuable than words, a legacy of strength, dignity, and the unbreakable bond of family. Seeds of change. As dawn approached and the first faint light began to seep into the cabin, the Grant family slowly began to wake. The world outside the plane was still dark, but inside, a quiet energy had begun to build. Adrian, who had woken up first, sat in contemplative silence, watching the serene faces of his wife and son as they slept. The confrontation with Lauren from the day before still lingered in his mind, but he felt a renewed sense of clarity and purpose. It wasn't just about standing up to prejudice. It was about showing Aaron, through example, that they could face any challenge with dignity and resilience. Naima stirred beside him, blinking sleepily before she smiled, catching his gaze. There was a silent understanding between them, a shared resolve. They had faced yet another test together, and once again, they had come out stronger. They exchanged a few whispered words about what they would do when they landed, the sights they would see, the memories they would create, and how they would fill this trip with joy and discovery. Soon, Aaron began to wake as well, stretching and rubbing his eyes. He looked around the cabin, momentarily disoriented, before his gaze landed on his parents. A small smile crept onto his face as he remembered the excitement of the trip and the adventures that awaited them. But then his smile faded slightly, and Adrian knew his son was recalling the unpleasant incident from the previous night. "Good morning, buddy," Adrian said, leaning over to ruffle Aaron's hair. "How'd you sleep?" Aaron shrugged, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Pretty good, Dad. I was thinking about yesterday. That lady, Lauren, I think her name was. Do you think she still doesn't like us?" Naima exchanged a quick glance with Adrian before answering. "Aaron, sometimes people have beliefs that they've held for a long time. Changing those beliefs can be difficult, even if they realize deep down that they're unfair. But what's important is that we don't let their opinions define who we are or take away our happiness." Aaron nodded, but his curiosity lingered. "Do you think she feels bad about what she said?" Adrian thought for a moment. "I don't know, son, but I think she might be thinking about it. Sometimes, when people are confronted with their own actions, it can make them see things differently. Whether or not she feels bad is up to her. Our job is to keep being ourselves, no matter how anyone else feels." As they spoke, a quiet murmur rose in the cabin. Other passengers were beginning to stir, and the flight attendants moved gently between rows, offering morning refreshments. Adrian noticed a few familiar faces, fellow passengers who had witnessed the events from the day before. Some offered polite smiles or nods, small gestures of solidarity that hadn't been there when they first boarded. To Adrian's surprise, the elderly man who had spoken to them earlier approached, his face warm with kindness. He held a steaming cup of coffee in his hands, and his silver hair caught the early light filtering through the cabin windows. He stopped beside their row and inclined his head, acknowledging Adrian, Naima, and Aaron with a respectful nod. "Good morning," he greeted them, his voice gentle. "I just wanted to let you know that what happened yesterday, it left an impression on more than just me. I spoke with a few of the other passengers after the lights dimmed. You'd be surprised at how many people were deeply affected by the way you handled that situation." Adrian and Naima exchanged a glance, touched by the man's words. Naima smiled and said, "Thank you, sir. We're just trying to set an example for our son. Sometimes, that's all we can do." The man nodded, his gaze lingering on Aaron. "Young man, you've got remarkable parents here. Hold on to what they're teaching you. The world isn't always fair, but it's people like your mom and dad who help make it a little better." Aaron's face lit up with pride, and he looked down, embarrassed but pleased. The elderly man gave them one last nod before returning to his seat, leaving the Grants in quiet reflection. Adrian felt a warmth spreading through his chest, a deep sense of fulfillment. He had always known that his work as a human rights lawyer could make a difference, but moments like this, where his actions impacted real people, reminded him of why he did it. As they continued their breakfast, Adrian noticed Lauren shifting in her seat. She seemed unusually quiet, her gaze fixed on her tray, her shoulders tense. Gone was the air of smug superiority that had characterized her the day before. Instead, there was a kind of fragility to her posture, as if she were wrestling with something inside herself. Adrian observed her with compassion, hoping that perhaps she was beginning to see things differently. He didn't want her to suffer. He simply wanted her to understand that people were more than the surface impressions she might have of them. Naima, noticing Lauren's discomfort, leaned over and whispered to Adrian, "Do you think we should say something? Maybe extend an olive branch." Adrian considered it. He knew that reaching out to someone who had wronged them wasn't easy, but he also believed in the power of kindness. He nodded slowly. "Maybe it's time we tried." As the flight attendants began clearing trays, Adrian stood up and approached Lauren, who seemed startled by his presence. She looked up, her expression guarded, as if bracing herself for another confrontation. Adrian gave her a polite nod, his face calm and open. "Good morning," he began, his tone gentle. "I just wanted to say, if there's anything we can do to make this flight more comfortable for you, please let us know. We're all just here to enjoy the journey." Lauren blinked, her expression softening as she processed his words. For a moment, she looked vulnerable, as though she didn't know how to respond. Adrian could see the hesitation in her eyes, the struggle between pride and a need for connection. Finally, she sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly. I'm not used to. I just always seen things a certain way," she stammered. "I didn't mean to cause a scene. It's just hard to unlearn things sometimes." Adrian nodded, understanding. "We all have things to unlearn, Ms. Fields. It's part of growing, of understanding each other. What matters is that we're willing to see people for who they are, not just for what we assume." Lauren seemed to reflect on his words, her eyes downcast. "I didn't expect you to be so gracious. I thought, well, it doesn't matter what I thought. I was wrong to judge you." Adrian offered her a kind smile. "Thank you. It takes courage to say that." He returned to his seat, feeling a sense of closure. He knew that Lauren might still hold on to some of her old beliefs, but he also knew that their interaction had planted a seed. Whether or not it would grow was up to her, but he was content knowing that he had done his part to reach across the divide. As they settled back in for the remainder of the flight, a few other passengers approached the Grants, offering words of support and even sharing stories of their own experiences with prejudice. It was as though the incident had sparked something within the cabin, a silent call to confront the biases and judgments that too often went unspoken. One woman, a young mother traveling with her child, spoke to Naima, her voice filled with empathy. "I saw what happened yesterday, and I just wanted to thank you. I grew up in a small town where people weren't always accepting. Seeing how you handled it, it made me feel hopeful. Like maybe things really can change." Naima smiled warmly. "Thank you for saying that. Every person who's willing to see past their own assumptions makes a difference. It's a journey, but if we take it together, there's nothing we can't change." The young mother nodded, her eyes shining with gratitude, before returning to her seat. Aaron, who had listened quietly to these exchanges, felt a new sense of pride swelling within him. For the first time, he truly understood the impact his family could have on others simply by being themselves, by standing firm in their values. He looked at his parents with admiration, realizing that they were more than just his mom and dad. They were people who inspired others, who made the world a better place. As the plane began its descent, the Grants prepared for landing, their hearts lighter than when they had boarded. They had turned a moment of pain into an opportunity for connection, a chance to spread understanding and kindness. And though their journey was far from over, they knew that this experience would remain with them as a reminder of the strength they shared as a family. When the wheels touched down and the plane taxied to the gate, Adrian looked at his family, feeling an overwhelming sense of gratitude. This was the life they had built together, a life of dignity, of resilience, and of quiet courage, and no one could take that away from them. As they disembarked, the flight crew and a few passengers offered them warm smiles and nods of acknowledgement. Even Lauren, who had initially bristled at their presence, managed a small, tentative smile as they passed her. For the Grants, this journey had been about more than a vacation. It had been a testament to who they were and what they stood for. They had faced prejudice, but they had responded with grace, showing Aaron and everyone around them that the true measure of a person was in their character, not in the judgments of others. And as they stepped out into the new city, ready to create memories and explore the world together, they carried with them the quiet confidence of a family that knew their worth and the power of their love. The seeds they had planted on that plane would continue to grow, touching lives in ways they might never know, but knowing that was enough. This was their legacy, a legacy of strength, kindness, and an unbreakable bond that nothing could diminish. The ripple effect. Stepping into the arrival terminal, the Grants felt the anticipation of their vacation truly begin to take hold. The airport was bustling with activity, families greeting loved ones, travelers rushing to their next destination, and tourists marveling at the unfamiliar surroundings. But for Adrian, Naima, and Aaron, there was a sense of renewal, a quiet resolve that had emerged from their experience on the plane. The world around them felt more vivid, the journey ahead brighter, as they looked forward to days filled with adventure and togetherness. As they made their way to the baggage claim, Adrian noticed a small group of passengers from their flight gathered nearby. One of them, a woman who had observed the confrontation with Lauren, approached the family with a smile that held both respect and admiration. "Excuse me, Mr. Grant," she said, her voice soft but sincere. "I just wanted to thank you. Watching how you and your family handled everything up there, it meant something to me. It made me think about a lot of things, about the way I see people and the assumptions I sometimes make without even realizing it." Adrian offered a warm smile, nodding in acknowledgement. "Thank you for saying that. Sometimes, the hardest battles we face are the ones inside ourselves. I'm glad we could be a part of that journey for you." The woman nodded, her eyes glistening with gratitude. "It's easy to let old beliefs cloud our judgment. Seeing how you stood up with such grace, it reminded me that kindness and respect should be at the core of everything we do. I promise I'll try to carry that with me." Naima, standing beside Adrian, reached out to gently touch the woman's arm. "We're all on a path, learning and growing. The fact that you're willing to reflect on this means more than you know. Thank you for being open to change." The woman smiled, a bit shyly, before waving and heading toward the exit, leaving the Grants to retrieve their luggage. As they waited, other passengers who had witnessed the incident passed by, some offering nods and smiles, others murmuring words of encouragement. It was as if the seeds planted on that flight had taken root, and each gesture, each kind word, served as a testament to the impact that a single act of courage and dignity could have. Aaron observed it all with wide eyes, soaking in the admiration directed toward his parents. He tugged on his mother's hand, a question bubbling up inside him. "Mom, do you think what happened will really change people? I mean, will they remember?" Naima knelt down to meet her son's gaze, her voice soft but resolute. "Change doesn't happen overnight, Aaron, but every little bit helps. Sometimes, all it takes is one moment to make someone think differently, to see the world in a new way. Maybe they won't remember everything about this day, but they'll remember how it felt. And that feeling can lead to something bigger." Adrian joined them, resting a hand on Aaron's shoulder. "Your mom's right. We may never see the full impact of what happened today, but that's okay. What matters is that we keep living by our values, no matter what. The rest will take care of itself. They collected their luggage and headed toward the exit, where they hailed a cab to take them to their hotel. As the city streets rushed by outside the window, Adrian and Naima exchanged glances, each lost in thought. They had achieved so much in their careers, made strides in their fight for justice, but moments like this reminded them that real change often happened in the quietest of ways, in the hearts and minds of ordinary people. By the time they reached the hotel, Aaron was bouncing with excitement again, his earlier reflections giving way to the thrill of exploring a new place. The family checked in and made their way to their suite, which overlooked a bustling square filled with colorful markets, street performers, and the enticing aroma of local cuisine. As they unpacked, Naima handed Aaron his camera, encouraging him to capture the world around them. Remember, Aaron, sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones we see with our own eyes. Go out there and capture everything that makes you feel something. He nodded eagerly, clutching the camera like a precious artifact. Thanks, Mom. I'll take the best pictures ever. You'll see. With a quick hug, he ran off to the balcony, snapping photos of the vibrant city below. Adrian watched his son with a proud smile, then turned to Naima, pulling her close. This trip is turning into something even more meaningful than we planned, isn't it? Naima nodded, her eyes reflecting a quiet strength. It is. I think Aaron is beginning to understand what we stand for, what we've dedicated our lives to. He's seeing it firsthand, and he's learning to carry that strength with him. That's more valuable than any sightseeing or luxury. As the family ventured out into the city, they were immersed in a whirlwind of sights, sounds, and flavors. They strolled through markets, sampling exotic foods, and watched traditional performances in the square. Aaron snapped photos with enthusiasm, capturing everything from the intricate details of hand-woven fabrics to the expressions of laughter and joy on the faces of locals. Everywhere they went, people greeted them warmly, intrigued by their openness and curiosity. For Aaron, it was a revelation, a reminder that kindness and respect transcended borders, languages, and appearances. At one point, while exploring a historical museum, they encountered a tour guide who shared a similar story of resilience and overcoming prejudice. She was a woman in her 50s, with a voice that carried both strength and compassion as she recounted her journey as a single mother raising children in a society that often underestimated her. Naima and Adrian listened intently, exchanging nods of understanding as she spoke. By the time she finished, there was a bond between them, an unspoken connection born from shared experiences. The tour guide placed a hand over her heart and looked at the Grants with gratitude. Thank you for listening. People don't always understand what it takes to stand tall in the face of judgment, to prove yourself over and over again. But seeing families like yours, it gives me hope. Adrian extended a hand, his voice filled with sincerity. Thank you for sharing your story. It's people like you who make the world a better place, who remind us all that we're not alone in this journey. As they left the museum, Aaron looked up at his parents, his eyes shining with pride. Mom, Dad, I think I understand now. When you stand up for yourself, you're not just helping yourself. You're helping others too, right? Naima's heart swelled, and she nodded, wrapping an arm around her son. Exactly, Aaron. When we show the world who we are, when we live with strength and integrity, it inspires others to do the same. That's how we create a ripple effect, one that can reach farther than we might ever realize. The rest of the week unfolded in a beautiful rhythm, filled with laughter, exploration, and quiet moments of reflection. The Grants visited ancient ruins, explored hidden neighborhoods, and spent long evenings talking about their experiences, not just on this trip, but throughout their lives. Aaron listened with rapt attention, his young mind absorbing the lessons that his parents shared, understanding that he was a part of something greater than himself. On their last night in the city, the family gathered on the rooftop terrace of their hotel, watching as the sun set over the skyline, casting hues of gold and purple across the horizon. Aaron held his camera up, snapping a photo of the view, capturing the moment as a reminder of everything they had shared. Adrian and Naima exchanged a glance, each feeling the weight and beauty of the journey they had taken, not just on this vacation, but through their entire lives. They knew that they had planted seeds of change, not only in the people they had encountered, but within Aaron himself. They had given him the tools to face the world with courage and empathy, to be a force for good. As the last light of day faded, and the stars began to appear, Aaron sat between his parents, leaning his head on his mother's shoulder. "I'm glad we took this trip," he whispered, his voice filled with a maturity beyond his years. "I feel different, like I understand more." Naima kissed the top of his head, her heart full. "We're proud of you, Aaron. You're learning what it means to stand up for yourself and for others, to live with kindness and strength. That's all we ever wanted for you." Adrian placed a hand on his son's shoulder, his voice low and steady. "Remember, son, the world is wide and full of challenges. But as long as you stay true to yourself, as long as you treat others with respect and compassion, you'll always make a difference. That's what it means to be part of this family." Aaron nodded, his eyes shining with understanding. He knew that this was just the beginning of his own journey, that he would face challenges and moments of doubt. But he also knew that he was armed with the strength of his parents, with the values they had instilled in him, and with the knowledge that he was capable of creating his own ripple effect. As they sat together beneath the stars, the Grants felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that they were leaving behind more than just memories. They were leaving behind a legacy of resilience, compassion, and an unbreakable bond that would carry them through every chapter of their lives. And as they prepared to return home, they knew that the world might not always be fair, that they would continue to face moments of judgment and misunderstanding. But they were ready. Together, as a family, they were ready to face whatever lay ahead, knowing that they would always have each other and the strength of the values they held dear. Coming home change. The day of their return finally arrived, but the Grants felt as though they were leaving behind something significant, like they had grown in ways that transcended the experiences of a simple family vacation. As they packed their belongings, each family member was filled with a quiet sense of fulfillment, an unspoken understanding that this journey had reshaped them in subtle but powerful ways. Adrian and Naima had watched their son mature, had seen his eyes open to the world in new ways, and they knew that they were coming home not as they had left, but stronger, more united. In the cab on the way to the airport, Aaron's camera hung around his neck, a constant reminder of the memories he had captured, snapshots of laughter, exploration, and connection. He flipped through the photos he'd taken, his fingers pausing over an image he'd captured on their first night in the city. A candid shot of his parents, deep in conversation, their faces illuminated by the warm glow of streetlights. They had been discussing something meaningful, perhaps about their lives, their work, or the journey that had brought them here. Looking at the photo, Aaron felt a surge of pride. His parents were more than just his guides through the world. They were his inspiration. Their strength, their kindness, their quiet resilience, all of it had become a part of him. And as he watched them in that image, he knew that he wanted to live up to the legacy they were building, to carry forward the values they had taught him. At the airport, the family moved through security and the bustling crowds of travelers with a newfound confidence. Adrian could feel the impact of the journey settling within him, a reminder that the work he did, the battles he fought for justice, extended beyond the courtroom and reached into everyday life. He realized that every interaction, every moment of kindness or courage, had the potential to inspire, to create ripples of change in ways he might never see. As they waited to board, Naima leaned close to her husband, her voice soft but filled with emotion. "Adrian, I feel like we've given Aaron something real on this trip. Not just memories, but a sense of who he is, of where he comes from. It's like he's seen a part of us that we always wanted him to understand." Adrian nodded, his eyes filled with pride and love. "Yes, And he's shown us who he's becoming. I can see it in the way he holds himself, the questions he asks. He's learning that he has a voice, that he can make a difference, just like we've tried to do. That's all we ever wanted for him." They shared a quiet moment, each reflecting on the growth they had witnessed in their son. Aaron, sitting beside them, seemed lost in his own thoughts, his gaze thoughtful as he watched the planes taking off and landing through the terminal window. "Mom, Dad," he said, breaking the silence, "when we get back, I want to talk to my friends about this trip. I want to tell them about how we stood up for ourselves, how you showed me that people can be kind, even if they start off thinking differently. I want to share it all." Naima placed a gentle hand on his back, her heart swelling with pride. "That's wonderful, Aaron. By sharing what you've learned, you'll help others see things differently too. Remember, even the smallest conversations can have a big impact." Aaron nodded, a determined look crossing his face. "I know it will. Maybe one day I can help people too, like you and Dad do." Adrian smiled, his chest tightening with emotion. "You already are, son. Every time you stand up for yourself, every time you choose kindness, you're helping others. And if you want to do more, we'll be right there with you, cheering you on." Just then, their flight was called, and they gathered their belongings, ready to head home. As they boarded, Adrian noticed a few familiar faces from their initial journey, including some of the passengers who had witnessed their earlier confrontation with Lauren. He gave a nod of acknowledgement, and they responded with small smiles, silent gestures of respect. The flight was peaceful, a marked contrast to their journey out. Adrian and Naima spent much of it in quiet conversation, while Aaron continued to scroll through the photos he'd taken, each one a testament to the powerful experiences he had shared with his parents. As the plane began its descent, Naima placed her hand on Adrian's, both of them feeling the anticipation of returning to their everyday lives, but knowing they were coming back with a renewed sense of purpose. This trip had shown them that the work they did, the values they stood for, reached beyond just their family. It was about creating a legacy that could inspire others to live with kindness, resilience, and courage. When the plane touched down, and they entered the arrivals hall, they were greeted by familiar faces waiting for them, friends and family members who had come to welcome them back. There were hugs and smiles, laughter and questions, as they shared small snippets of their adventures and talked about the memories they'd made. In the weeks that followed, Aaron stayed true to his promise. He shared stories with his friends, recounting the lessons he'd learned, the people he had met, and the way his parents had stood up with dignity and strength. His classmates listened with wide eyes, some of them asking questions, others nodding with quiet admiration. For many of them, it was the first time they had heard someone their age talk about issues like prejudice and respect with such passion and clarity. Aaron's words began to spread, his stories reaching teachers and parents, sparking conversations that hadn't been spoken aloud before. He had become a quiet force in his school, inspiring others to see the world with a bit more empathy, a bit more understanding. At the same time, Adrian and Naima found themselves reinvigorated in their work. Adrian, back in the courtroom, approached each case with a renewed determination, reminded of the power of his work to shape lives, to stand up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves. Naima, in her lectures, shared stories of resilience and justice, encouraging her students to look beyond the surface, to challenge their own biases, and to seek out truth in all things. Months after their trip, Adrian received an unexpected letter in the mail. It was from Lauren, the woman from their flight. The handwriting was neat, and the note was simple, but its message was profound. "Dear Mr. Grant, I don't know if you remember me, but I was on your flight when we first met. I was the woman who made some regrettable comments. I have thought about that encounter often since then, and I wanted to say that I'm sorry. I realize now that I let my own prejudices cloud my judgment. Watching the way you handled that situation, the way you spoke to me with such kindness, even when I didn't deserve it, it changed something in me. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I am working on becoming a better person. Thank you for showing me what grace and strength look like. Your family inspired me in ways I can't put into words. With gratitude, Lauren Fields. Adrian held the letter for a long time, the words sinking in. He showed it to Naima, who read it with a soft smile, tears in her eyes. They knew that this was the true impact of their journey, that even those who had once stood against them could be moved, could learn, and could change. They shared the letter with Aaron, who read it with wide eyes, understanding for the first time the full weight of the impact his family had made. He looked up at his parents, his voice barely above a whisper. We really did make a difference, didn't we? Naima wrapped her arms around him, her heart filled with pride and love. Yes, sweetheart, we did. And remember, you can continue making a difference every single day. Adrian joined them, pulling them both into a hug. This is just the beginning, Aaron. Your journey is only starting. You have the power to make this world a better place, just by being who you are. In that moment, Aaron knew that he would carry his family's legacy forward. He would grow up knowing that he was capable of sparking change, of inspiring others, of standing up with grace and strength. The journey they had taken together was more than a vacation. It was a chapter in the story of their lives, a testament to the power of resilience and love. As they held each other close, the Grants knew that they would continue facing challenges, that there would be more moments of hardship and misunderstanding. But they were ready. Together, they were unstoppable, a family bound by an unbreakable bond, a family that had turned a single moment into a legacy of change, kindness, and strength that would carry forward for generations. And as they let go and began their day, each of them knew, in their hearts, that they were part of something greater than themselves. They were part of a ripple effect that would touch lives in ways they might never see. And that was enough.